Chérie Scott, what a joy and a privilege to talk to you. I'm very much looking forward to this. Not just because we had a little touch point before, we've talked before, and I just know how inspiring it is to have you in a room and share some of your views, your perspectives on coaching, transformation. You look back on 50 years of coaching experience now with the first coaching session in 1974.
I think 48, I think.
Sorry. It's just such a joy. You have such a long, flourishing career in coaching. You've started coaching over 20 years before the ICF was a thing. There's so much we could tap into, and I'm just excited to explore your perspective and your mind and your way of being and some of your stories. So welcome to the podcast, Chérie.
Thank you, Yannick. I am delighted to be here with you.
Wonderful. Well, where do we start? I wondered that because there's such a rich tapestry. And when I looked back at some of the conversations that you've had, I think maybe a good point of starting is tell us about Lloyd.
Yeah, Lloyd. Well, to tell you about Lloyd, I have to go back just a little bit because I had a very privileged childhood, and there was a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of philosophy and reality, which is that we lived in a very opulent home with servants, and we had everything that we wanted, but we didn't have any money. We didn't have an allowance. We didn't have money to buy a candy bar. We didn't have money to spend on things. And if we wanted money, we had to ask for it and specifically tell what it was for. So there was a little bit of this scarcity consciousness in the midst of an abundant world. So that was confusing at first. But as I grew up and got older, my mother passed away when I was 20 years old. And it was fairly sudden, but my father got remarried, moved to Florida, sold our family home in New Jersey and New York. And there I was. What's to become of me? What's to become of my life? Who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? I didn't know the answer to any of these questions. And nobody had prepared me for a life because I was just expected to get married, have children, and be, a wife and a mother, and to maybe run some charities. It was not expected that I would do anything beyond that. And my mother said at one point, if you could become a teacher, so if your husband dies, you could support your children, that would be great. But that was about it in terms of professional conversation. So when I found myself at 20 years old thinking, who do I turn to? Where do I turn? What do I do? And so I asked everybody I knew, what do you think I'd be good at? Now, that's a natural thing for people to do, to look to people that they respect and to ask, what do you think?
Yeah, what do you think I should do?
Exactly. And a lot of people had opinions. They didn't hold back. Some said medicine, and some said law, and some said real estate, and others said vitamin. They said all different kinds of things. And I thought to myself, gosh, I'm even more confused now than I was before. Maybe I'll turn within as opposed to asking everyone out there. That was kind of a new concept. And I thought, well, okay, I'll start.
Can I jump in there? Because that seems like quite a significant shift. Is that what led to that shift in thinking? Because this is such at the core of coaching.
I had always been a very spiritual child. And I had a relationship with what I call God from the earliest moments that I could remember. And I talked to God very freely, as if I had a direct pipeline. And there was nothing in the way, and there was no needed person to intervene. So I would always, as a child, talk to God. And here I was, and I was asking everybody else, but this moment was, this isn't working. And I'm getting more confused. What do I do? And then the thought came, have a conversation with God. That's what you do most of the time anyway. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll do that. So it seemed very natural to me to do that. So I said to God, I said, hey God, I'm a little confused down here. And I don't know which direction to go in, and I need some help. I'm not asking for a burning bush or anything quite so significant, but if you could kind of point me in the direction, give me some clues, help me out, that would be really great. That was my first request from God about this time in my life. And what happened is I started getting messages, and we call them messages in our work. And the first message was, and it came through me kind of like a lightning bolt. You're a catalyst. I thought, that's very nice. I don't use that word very often, maybe never, but I think it's nice to be a catalyst. Maybe I should look it up and see what it means.
Uh-huh.
So I found out that a catalyst is something or someone who actually is the one that causes other things to take action and motion and create results. So I thought, oh, catalyst, I like that. That fits. That's fine. And then the second message came about 2 weeks later, and it said, you're to work in growth and development. Now, I knew what growth and development were, but there are a lot of applications for that term. Could be refinishing furniture. It could be building things. It could be, a lot of things. And then 2 weeks later, I got the next message, and it said, you have a gift for working with people. Took a deep breath, and I said, okay, so I'm a catalyst. I work with people in their growth and development. Now, what do I do with that? Do I put that on a business card? Do I say at network meetings, hi, I'm a catalyst and I work with people in their growth and development? I thought, this is kind of strange. I mean, I asked for guidance, I asked for messages, I asked for direction, and I got this. And then I was kind of mad at God. And I said, I asked you for a real direction, and you gave me this kind of riddle that I am a catalyst that works with people in their growth and development. I don't know what to do with it. And then Lloyd showed up. Lloyd called me on the phone. I knew Lloyd. He was a friend. We worked together. We were kind of colleagues. And he called me and said, I want you to work with me in my business. And I said, thanks a lot, but I'm trying to figure out my life purpose. And we said goodbye. Later, he called a couple of weeks and he said, I'm really serious about you working with me in my business, Chérie. And I said, I'm flattered that you would think of me, but there are people who do that for a living. And if you called one of them, I think they'd be much more effective than I would be. He finally called a third time, and I thought, 3 times with the same question? What's going on? And I said to him, Lloyd, why are you calling me? There are people who do this for a living. There are lots of people out there. Why are you calling me? And he said, that's very simple. It's because I trust you. I said, well, that's very nice that you trust me, and I appreciate it, but I really don't know anything. He said, that could be really helpful. I said, you're willing to pay me your hard-earned money, knowing full well that I know nothing? He said, that's right. I took a deep breath and I said, well, then I accept. And he was my first client. And I went to his business and I looked, watched, took notes, talked to people, interviewed them, watched systems and process, just gathered information in my brain. And on the 5th day, we met outside the office. And he said immediately, what did you observe? And I said, before I tell you my observations, I need to know what it is that you want. He said, what I want? And I said, there has to be something that you want that's different from what you have, because you called me. And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, so that's what we have to explore together, is what it is that you truly want at this point in your life. And he said, I don't really know. And I said, well, let's talk about it together. And that started our coaching relationship. And he left my apartment at this moment, and he was shining. His face was glowing. His eyes were twinkling. He saw and discovered some things about himself and about his life and his business that he hadn't discovered on his own. And he started telling people about this friend of his who asked the best questions and got him totally clear. And the phone started to ring. I felt nervous. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I was just doing what came naturally to me. And people started saying, can you ask me those questions? So I started saying to them, I'm not going to give you advice. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to give you direction. It's all inside of you. But what I'll help you do is to unlock the doors to find your truth inside. Most people said, well, whatever you're going to do, I want to do it because I've heard it's great. And so,
I saw this guy glow and I want the same.
I want my glow.
Yeah. And it exemplifies so much of what I think good coaching is about. And it seems to have come quite natural to you, that curiosity, that sharing observations, that that sitting in the not knowing, and I guess there's an element of luck involved at the time as well, that somebody appreciated that and sought it out and recognized the value of somebody not knowing, being curious about what you're doing, and through that creating new insights.
Well said. My friend and colleague, Kathy, said, can I sit in and watch a session? And I said, let me check with the client and see that it's all right. She sat in the corner of the room with her clipboard and her pen, and she observed, and the client stood up and we shook hands, and they left with the glow again, because the glow was pretty consistent. And she said, that was amazing. I said, what was? And she said, what you did. I said, what did I do? She said, you did a lot of things. And I said, well, I'm not sure what I did. And she said, well, I've made a list of what I noticed, but it was pretty profound. And so I said, really, you think so? She said, number one, you suspended judgment. Number two, you created a safe environment. Number three, you started asking open-ended questions. You didn't ask any leading questions at all. You were so curious, so interested, and you believed the entire time that the answers resided within the client. And she went on with her assessment of what I did. And I sat with my mouth hanging open saying, well, anybody can do that, right? And she said, well, maybe, but this is the first time I've observed this particular approach to working with people and pulling the answers out of them. And I said, well, do you think it's different or special? And she said, I think it's incredibly special. And I, Kathy, was born being able to read and listen and create music by ear. I could hear something and play it on the piano. I said, well, that's a gift. And she said, but you have a gift also. It hasn't yet been recognized, but you were born with a gift of being able to pull out people's truth.
Yeah.
And I looked
What a
at her
strength.
and said, yeah, totally strange. And I thought to myself, I had never acknowledged that I had anything of value. I never knew that I could do anything that could help anybody. I was just kind of a normal, weird person. But she noticed something about me, and Lloyd saw it too. And other people started to recognize it. And they asked, could you train me? Can you teach me what you do? And that was, another moment of revelation. Can I train you?
Yeah.
I don't know if I can.
Chérie, before we go there, I just want to pause there, because it's so common when people have these strengths. I mean, I come from a positive psychology perspective. So for me, it's a strength. It's something that is so core to our character, something that energizes us and comes so natural. That's why we're particularly good at it. Some people don't use their strength, and, they do other things because they follow the shoulds, that they've been given perhaps. But tapping into something like that, I hear that so often, and I'm sure many coaches hear that from often. It's like, what, doesn't anybody do that? That's just normal, right? And I don't usually say what Cassie says, and says, yeah, maybe, but you do it well. I say, oh, no, a lot of people, they really look up to you for doing this, and it comes natural to you and you don't recognize it in yourself. And just being faced with that perspective from the outside can be a revelation and really help somebody connect with, oh, this is me. And I think a lot of coaches, they feel naturally called to coaching. This is not something that people tell you should be doing. I mean, now more and more, but not really. Most coaches, they feel called to do the coaching work because they have this natural strength, that love of learning, that curiosity, that, empathy, that love, that kindness, that whatever sits at the center of your coaching. That's why there's so many coaching approaches.
Yes,
but
I agree with you 100%. And I also think that it is a calling, that people who love to help other people and who want to be of service are really called to the profession.
Mm-hmm. I think I have that somewhere further down on my list, but I think now is a good time. I talked to Robin Shore the other day about supervision as a spiritual path. And I hear that spiritual path very clearly in your path. And I've heard you talk about a coaching prayer to prepare for a coaching session, but it all seems to be quite a spiritual path for you. So I wonder if you could speak into that space because that seems to be sitting at the core of what drives you in your work.
Well, I don't ever want to proselytize to people or to tell them how they should believe or how they should conduct their lives or what they should do. I really steer away from the shoulds as much as possible. But for me, there has always been a very deep spiritual side. I was raised Catholic, but I had some issues with the Catholic Church. First of all, they wouldn't allow me to become a priest. That was a gender discrimination issue. And then I had others with the Catholic Church because I heard that anybody who wasn't Catholic would go to hell, and I didn't think that God would do that. I just thought, if he's a all-kind, forgiving, loving God, he's not going to make anybody go to hell who doesn't really deserve it just because they have a different religion. That's crazy. So I had a lot of issues with the Catholic Church growing up because it didn't sound congruent. And I was a very congruent child. In other words, either things fit or they didn't fit. But I was noticing those things at a very early age. And so
I have a great coaching skill.
It's something that I have put to use later in life, but I was listening and saying, how could that be? How could that make sense? Why would, a loving, kind, omnipotent God be so discriminatory? It just doesn't. I mean, I think of God, if there's a God, and I believe there is a God, that God is inclusive and not discriminating. I mean, if there's anything that's absolutely true about what I believe in God, it's that God is kind and generous and good to us. That's why, sometimes I say to people, they say, well, why do you coach people and what do you want from coaching? And what's it all about? And I say, well, can I tell you the secret? And some people will say, yes. I say, training coaches for me is like training earth angels. We're like guardian angels to people. We help them find their own truth. We support them in being courageous and confident, curious, and we help them listen to their own inner wisdom and follow it. I said, that's a little bit like an earth angel. I don't tell that to all the executives I coach, but in truth, that's kind of how I see it, because our clients can tell us anything, and we hold it in a sacred place without having to judge it or change it or fix it, make it different. We hold it in a sacred confidence and we allow them to be who they are, which to me is such a special place in life, because there just aren't many places where people really allow you to be the fullness of who you are.
So when we help people to be who they are, to get rid of the noise and really help them to figure out what they want, there's a belief in there that will have a positive influence on the world, that will lead to these kind of earth angels that have a positive impact, that do good in the world. Is that what I'm reading, or am I reading something into it?
No, you're reading it perfectly, totally accurately. People say to me, well, what if? And then they ask me all these hypothetical questions about what if somebody's bad or evil, or, what if Hitler were to come for a coaching session? It's like,
fair question.
I know. I said, let's deal with that when it happens. But my belief is that most people, almost everyone who's ever come to me for coaching, I can't say I have run into an evil person. There may be some people who are listening to their lower selves versus their higher selves, but I've never had anybody evil come to coach with me.
I think this is such an important question, and one that I often ask people, particularly when introducing coaches to the humanistic space, the person-centered space, and just create a space where you are being with someone, where you create the conditions for them to grow in whatever direction they feel called to, and trust that people will self-actualize if you create those conditions, that a tree will grow as it's supposed to be and then do what a tree does, which is create a positive influence in the world, create oxygen, whatever a tree does. But I think we need to make a decision at some point, whether we believe that human beings are inherently good if we allow them to be, if we remove what might be in the way of that. And not everybody believes that. Some people say, look, if we look at the Hobbes and the Homo homini lupus, the man is another man's wolf. And if we allow people to run free, they will just take each other's tools and take as much land as they can and advance their own survival. So I think a lot of people, and I think also a lot of coaches, they struggle with that fundamental view of what human beings are.
Yeah, it's an existential question.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we at our core? Are we good or are we evil? And if the aliens come down from other planets, are we going to kill them before we ask them what they're doing here?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that I think is very important to be able to assess. How do you want to focus your energy, your power, your talent, your capabilities? Because when you coach another person, you really do infuse them with love, power, capability, and the belief in themselves.
And this is why I think your work and work in the broadest sense of what it is so important. Because as humans, we don't have a great track record of meeting otherness with kindness and curiosity. So being met with somebody who has those kind of coaching qualities that you describe, and we dig into that a little bit further as we go along. When we're met with somebody like that, it's much more likely that we're going to meet others with that because we know it works and it helps us grow and it creates something better. As long as resources aren't scarce, perhaps. I think that that's going to be interesting. And that leads to my next question, because we live in a time where resources get more and more scarce. We live in a time of climate crisis. We live in very fast changing times, very trying times. So I feel that there's a responsibility in there that you're describing, us as coaches, to have a positive influence on our clients and the world by association or by how these clients go out into the world. So I wonder if you could speak to the kind of responsibility that coaches carry and whether it's a good thing, arguably, but then also we don't want to guide our clients or tell them what to do, even unconsciously. But we seem to have a responsibility to carry that kind of way of relating to people out into the world with intention.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And one of the key things is for us to care for ourselves, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. That's not just physically care for ourselves. It's emotionally, psychologically, interpersonally, spiritually. Every way, we need to ensure that we are in good shape in order to be able to show up for our clients. Now, in the past, that has been called selfish. In coaching, it's called essential. And we want to be able to know that caring for and about ourselves is what allows us to have the energy to be able to devote to another person. It's also what allows us to manage the change that's happening around us, whether it's conflict or hostility or anxiety. If we're in good shape with ourselves, our relationship with ourselves first and foremost, it allows us to be able to be centered and to be able to support our clients in managing what's happening for them, with their families, with their communities, with their businesses, with working from home, with dealing with the pandemic and climate change and all of the rest of the crises that seem to be centering on the human experience right now. We as coaches have to take care of ourselves, and we have to ensure that we can lead the way into the future for people who are fearful, anxious, not feeling centered, feeling like they don't know where to turn, like I was when I was 20, didn't know where to turn or who to turn to. That's a feeling that when you've had it, you know it, and you can empathize with the person who's experiencing it.
I love that. I just want to leave that in the room for people to think about, I think sometimes in conversation, we don't have those kind of spaces. And you said so many important things right now that I think inspire a coach to think about where's their place. And it's true, we can't pour from an empty cup, right? We need to figure ourselves out. And this is what attracted me to the profession, if we could call it that, of coaching or of working with people, because part of what we're working with and part of our obligation as coaches is to be in a good place ourselves, figure out what kind of feelings, emotions, thoughts are with us, to look at some of our own shadows and see how that affects our work in relation with others. Because when we are in relation with somebody in coaching, it's a deep relationship. We cannot help but influence another person just by our way of being, just by smiling and nodding or frowning or being curious or, making a face. And all of a sudden the other person is influenced either to keep talking or maybe to pause or to reflect or to question themselves or to feel challenged or to feel nervous or to feel excited and elated. And there's so much that we bring into a relationship. I feel you want to say something to that.
Well, you're so right. And I heard a term just recently. I didn't make it up myself, but I heard this term, micro interventions.
Huh.
And I really liked it because in coaching, if we're really present and grounded and focused on the other person, we can have these little micro interventions that really address what's happening deeper that go by very quickly, whether it's a sigh, or it's looking up at the heavens, or it's putting a hand on the cheek, or it's, they're just these little micro interventions.
Yeah, I heard somebody the other day just go, huh. And it was such a powerful intervention in the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'd love to tap into that a little bit further of like what you're bringing into the coaching. What are some of those core skills? You mentioned the 3 C's, and maybe that's a good way to start. But feel free to go anywhere. The question that I'm trying to sketch out is for a coach who's maybe starting out or a coach who's been doing it for years and kind of revisits or questions the basics. What sits at the foundation of your coaching, let's say?
First and foremost is what we discussed before, which is the not knowing mindset. And that's in training coaches, my experience, one of the most difficult things to do because most of the people who come to us have been trained to know. They could be doctors, lawyers, philosophers, psychiatrists, HR professionals, CEOs, but they've all been trained to know the answers for everyone, not necessarily themselves, but for everyone around them. And that orientation of knowing and telling is the reverse of what we do in coaching, which is ask, listen, and empower. And so the process of having people give that up is not easy because that's all wired up in their ego and their identity. I'm an advisor. I tell people what to do. People listen to me. They follow my advice. It's very important. That's great. But if you want to be a coach, that's not a mentor and it's not an advisor. It's more of a catalyst. Well, I can't tell people what to do. That's right. And they really kind of go a little crazy in the process because they want to coach, but they have to give up something to be able to coach, which they've worked so hard to develop over the years. So, that not knowing mindset to me is fundamental. And when we help people find that place, it is coupled with curiosity, which is one of the C's. Because when you give up knowing, you can become curious. But if you're locked into knowing, you're not going to be curious because you already know. So it's kind of like either or. Either you know or you're curious, or you're curious or you know, but you cannot be both at the same time.
That's the opposite. I heard somebody say that knowing is the opposite of learning. And that speaks exactly to that.
Exactly. So that's the first thing, is that not knowing mindset. And then that curiosity about the other person, about their situation, about their challenges, about their opportunities, about what they're dealing with and what it means to them, in terms of the impact to themselves, their families, their lives, what it's going to do, how it's going to change them, and how they feel about that, which then gets coupled with courage, the courage to take the steps. Because in any coaching situation, I talk about DWBC, And I'll just finish that. Along with the courage comes the confidence to be able to take those steps. And curiosity, confidence, and courage, the 3 C's in the triangle. But can I talk a little bit about DWBC?
Yeah.
Okay, so D is desire. Mm-hmm. And every coaching engagement, every coaching conversation has to start with desire. The person being coached has to want. They have to want something that's different from what they currently have. It doesn't mean that what they currently have isn't great. It may be going from good to great, maybe going from great to outstanding. It might be going from outstanding to unbelievable. I mean, but they have to want something that's different from what currently exists.
Yeah.
And that want is critical.
Or from confused to not being confused about anymore. Because some people say, oh, you must have a goal if you want to come to coaching. Well, sometimes it's the desire to have a goal and to figure out where to go next, even though you don't know where that is. And that's still very coachable based on the D.
It's totally coachable. You're absolutely right. And it's that place of, what do you want? Well, as you say, I'd like to be clear, focused, and not confused anymore. Thank you. Please help me. So that's a great D, desire. Along with the desire comes W, the willingness. The willingness to do something outside your comfort zone that's going to stretch you into the dimension that you want to go into. So let's just say, take your word of confusion. Confusion could be a very comfortable state of being because you never have to do anything specifically because you're confused. And when you don't know, you can't do. And you can't make that choice. So maybe confusion has become a comfortable way of being. And moving out of confusion into clarity means that you start knowing for yourself what you truly want. And so I always say to people, the W, the willingness part, is the willingness to stretch, to grow, to change, to experiment. And if you're not willing to change something that you do, then you end up with the old adage, which is, if you keep doing what you've done, you're going to keep getting what you've got. Definition of insanity. So go right along with the desire comes the willingness to explore, experiment, try on something new, and grow in the coaching process. So then we get to B, which is belief. Do you believe it's possible? Do you believe it's possible for you to have what you want? Do you believe it's possible to go and grow where you desire? Do you believe it's possible for you to be that person that you aspire to be? And belief is where people get a little bit squirrely because they think, I don't know, I'm not sure that I believe it. Desire was one thing, willingness is something else, but belief, eeks, that's really hitting me at a deep place, and it's a little bit scary.
That opens quite a few doors because some people, they come with that belief because it's been instilled in them from early on. You're going to be great. You went to Eton, you're going to be our next leader. You went to an Ivy League school, or just like, you're amazing. And many kids haven't heard that in their lives. They've been told that you don't amount to nothing, or you shouldn't stick your head out, know your place. You have nothing to do in business, or you should marry and have kids and maybe work in a charity. Yeah,
exactly. The belief has been handed down based on the beliefs of the parents and caretakers.
Yeah.
So their limiting beliefs get passed on to the next generation, however limiting or empowering they could be. But that's where a person has to examine, what are those subtle unconscious beliefs that are driving my behaviors?
It sounds therapeutic. And sorry to interrupt, but that's a question. I know we have a letter left, and this could be a longer conversation, but how would you address that? Because you can go quite deep, and especially if it's about limiting belief being instilled in childhood and throughout and being so sedimented. Where's that line between coaching and therapy, and does it even matter where that line is?
Well, for us, and what we do is that we didn't just get born today. All of us have a past. And the past is helpful as a reference point to designing the future. Mm-hmm. We use the past to be able to give us information that's relevant, meaningful, and poignant to where we're going, but we don't necessarily dwell on it. So discovering a belief that dictates one's reality and then taking that belief and examining it and seeing, do you want to keep it or let it go? And if you want to change the belief, are you willing to go through the steps of finding new evidence to support your new belief system? So it's a touch on the past, but not a dwelling.
That makes perfect sense and very concisely summed up, because we're working with somebody who's quite resourceful. If this belief causes so much pain that this pain is just constantly in the way of engaging with the future, then that might be a touch point for therapy. Then it might be helpful to go with somebody who really explore that past on a weekly basis. But as long as somebody can explore this, question it, maybe create a better belief based on new evidence. This is actually not relevant anymore. This is actually not my story. That was somebody else's story. And actually, it doesn't really support it. I just allowed it to happen all these years. Hugely therapeutic in that way, but very much a coaching process with somebody who's quite resourceful to look at this and move forward with a desire to move forward, and creating new belief, which fits very well in this concept.
Absolutely. And the last letter in DWBC is commitment. It's the C.
Mm-hmm.
And in coaching, there will always be a certain amount of discomfort in the growing into the new reality, into the new person, into the new beliefs, into the new dimension of one's personality and character. And that growing will have discomfort for sure. For some people more than others. And for some, it will be a redefinition of who they are. It will be a semi-identity crisis. But that commitment to stay the course, no matter what, until we get to the destination is so important because, some people, and it's happened to me over the years, both in corporate and individual, where people have said, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. I didn't know it was going to take this much. This is a lot.
Yeah. Right. Thank you for that. That's such a helpful, I wanted to say acronym. Is that still an acronym? I think it is.
An acronym, usually you can say like, it flows like SMART goals.
Yeah.
But DWBC, I can't make, it's hard to make an acronym.
I think if we say it often enough, it becomes a word.
Okay, I'll go with that.
DWBC. I think it flows. There's a flow in it. Okay. Right. I like it.
Okay.
Is there anything else? I know you mentioned compassion, and you talked about you talk about a relational aspect. I'm a sucker for theory, applied theory. I wonder if there's any theoretical frameworks, philosophical frameworks that you're naming, because a lot of that came intuitively, and then people like Kathy, for example, helped you extract what it is that works. But I'm sure in the last 48 years, you've done a lot of reflecting, creating a lot of trainings on what is it that works. And I wonder if you care about theoretical frameworks or philosophical frameworks, and what might some of those be, if that's important to you, that you could put out there for coaches.
Well, in our TECC, which is Transformational Executive Coach Certification Program, we have module number 7, which actually deals with the pioneers who gave us pieces of the coaching process along the way. Mm-hmm. We start with Socrates in the beginning, who asked questions from the Stoa and believed that people had inner knowing, and Maria Montessori, who believed that children have within them that innate knowledge about who they are. I call it spiritual DNA. But each person who along the way, Carl Rogers, who taught us about active listening. And I was so fortunate when he was alive, I got to have dinner with Carl Rogers and got to know him.
Wonderful.
Really special. Even Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who gave us the 5 levels of dealing with change and death and dying. There were so many people who gave us pieces of the puzzle that all fit together in a beautiful mosaic that I think is what coaching is today. It's gone through an evolution. And it's really, I don't know, I'm in love with coaching. And it's something that I discovered my purpose in life when I was 24 years old. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I got to do it, and I've gotten to do it all along. And I've also gotten to be able to invite other people to be a coach, or to be trained as a coach, or to train others as coaches, or become licensees. I mean, I feel so blessed to be able to have the life that I have been fortunate to live. Really touches me.
I can tell. On that point, actually, you've put so much out there. You talked about not knowing and the importance of that, and at the same time, there's so much that you know, and there's so much that you have shared generously of your knowledge. In conversations, you've written, I don't know, 12 books. You've been on Oprah twice. Oprah mentioned that your book, If Life Was a Game, These Are the Rules, should be in any household in America. What a thing to say. I mean, that kind of thing helps you blow up a lot, but also people want your knowledge. So given that you believe so much in the not knowing, and when you coach, there isn't, like, I wonder what's the relationship between guiding and not knowing, given that people want to be told, they want the knowledge. And some of the knowledge, if we put it on the table, is incredibly helpful for somebody to consider as a different perspective. And I think a lot of coaches struggle with having valuable knowledge and feeling like they're not allowed to put any of this on the table or share it. When, in marketing, they tell you need to position yourself as an expert and put some knowing out there so people, recognize your ideas. And then they're in this dilemma of, they put some knowing out there, people like them for their knowing, and all of a sudden they're being faced with somebody who's asking questions and doesn't want to give any of their opinions. So many coaches, they give their opinions and they allow their clients to grapple with them and then still choose their own way. But I'm trying to explore that relationship and what you think about that relationship, given that you have such strong beliefs in not knowing and such a tremendous amount of knowledge.
Well, my journey has gotten me from the not knowing into some ego traps along the way. And when I say ego traps, what I mean is, I know what's best for you. I know what to do. I know it. I am the one in charge. And whenever my ego has taken over, the universe has pulled the proverbial rug out from underneath me to teach me a lesson in humility.
Wow. Could you give us an example?
Oh, I can give you many examples. I was in San Francisco, which is where I started MMS back 1974, October 15th. And I had a wonderful house and a lovely husband and a beautiful little baby who was 18 months old. And I had a lovely nanny and I had a great office. I had a terrific staff. I had a perfect life. And one day I came home and I found a note. And my husband had left. And he said he wasn't coming back. And this was one of those moments I had never been prepared for in my entire life. Because I was, as people had called me in those days, this is, Jennifer, 1981, the Queen of Consciousness. That's what people called me. This is I don't know if I liked being the Queen of Consciousness. It had a lot of expectations. But there I was, standing like a deer in the headlights, like, how could this happen to me? How could this happen to me? There was my ego like reaming. So I said to myself, what am I going to do? And luckily, I had my dear partner with me, Barbara, who was my CPA in the business, and she was in law school, brilliant woman. And Barbara looked at me and she said, get a hold of yourself. You have to think of that child and you have to make some plans now. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, you're right. I just don't feel in the slightest bit capable. She said, you're capable. You're going to get a hold of yourself and you're going to do what you need to do. And I said, okay, you're going to help me during this journey. So it was Barbara and Donna McCarthy, my sister Linny. I mean, a whole bunch of really great friends who I had trained as coaches, by the way, who helped me to get out of my own way and to be able to grapple with a situation that was absolutely devastating. Not only did he leave, but when I started going through the paperwork that he left behind, I realized that he took all the money. And I had $400 in the world. $400. And the mortgage had not been paid. None of the utility bills had been paid. Everything was about to be shut off. I had a tiny baby. I had a lot. I mean, it was like, what am I going to do? And so I sat down with Barbara as my coach. And we devised a plan where I was going to go to the people that I believed, trusted and believed in me. And I was going to ask them for not a donation, but a loan. And I would sell the house. And when I sold the house, I would pay everybody back with interest. And I raised $15,000 in 10 days' time. And I paid the mortgage down. So I was not in arrears. I paid the utilities. I paid everything that was going to be a crisis. I hired a real estate agent to say, I've borrowed this money. I need to get this house sold. I need to pay people back. This is important for my integrity as a person who tells the truth and lives life in a certain way. And everything came to pass. I paid everybody back. I got the house sold. I got everything handled. But it was with the support of the people around me who believed in me to be able to get through this crisis, because I had never really been prepared to deal with a crisis of this magnitude, ever. So, I mean, talk about the proverbial rug being pulled out from underneath me. My questions to myself at that point were, why is this happening? And what can I learn from it? And the message was, in order for you to do this work, you need to be humble. In order for you to do this work, you need to be grateful. You need to remember that everyone has their own answers inside of them, and you're the catalyst to help them connect with their true inner self. I took a deep breath and I said, okay, I hear you. I think I get it. I may forget it, but at this moment, I really get it. And throughout my life, whatever has happened has given me the lesson in humility that I say, okay, I understand. I get it. It's not about me. It's about what I can do to help others. Mm-hmm. It's about the space I can hold. It's about the truths I can help unveil. Yeah. It's not about me. It's about them.
Yeah. And this, just to pick up the point of knowing again, you know how to help others. Maybe not knowing what others need to be doing. You don't want to add to their to-do list or offer your own shoulds. But you know stuff, and maybe it's a good time to pick up I think it's your recent book on the negaholics, right? To help really negative people who are stuck in kind of a negative mindset and just can't help but see only the negative. And I think many coaches come across that. I teach positive psychology. That's usually what I get in the beginning. They're like, I have so many negative clients and I want them to be more positive, which is not really what positive psychology is about, by the way. But you know a lot about what somebody can be doing to help them break out of that kind of cycle. So I would imagine it's really difficult when you're in a session with somebody who's quite negative, not to offer guidance, and coaches we can offer guidance on process, but not necessarily on what somebody's path will be. So again, trying to make sense of how do you navigate all this knowing with taking a position of not knowing?
Well, first of all, most people who come in and are negative, they don't know they're negative. They think they're being realistic. Mm-hmm. And that's their perspective, and they believe that. I'm just being realistic about what can and can't happen. I mean, it's not that I don't think that this is a great idea or something, but I'm just being realistic about the way the world is and about what I can do and about what can happen. And there is so much competition out there, and then they start going on about their realism. And what I'll say to them, and I'll say, you're right, but so what? I mean, do you want to be right about this, or do you want to have a life that you want to live? And that's when we'll start looking at, well, is this the truth, or is this a point of view? Or is this something that can be changed or altered? Because, people will say to me, well, you've had a perfect life. You have everything you want. Everything's wonderful for you. I said, not exactly. They'll say, what do you mean? You're not perfect life? I said, well, my mother was an alcoholic. My mother died when she was, when I was 20. My father got remarried. My father disinherited all of his children. My house burned down when I was 12. I've been on the verge of bankruptcy about 3 times. It hasn't been totally perfect. I haven't lived a perfect life, but I have lived a life that I've been willing to look at from a different perspective than being the victim. And that is where the difference is, because a negaholic will come into the situation feeling victimized by their circumstances. Very easy to do. And I've been there and done that. But I knew at the time it wasn't a healthy way to go. And that I'd have to get one of my coaches to help me climb out of it, because victimhood is not going to empower anybody. And in order to be able to cause new things to happen, I have to believe in my own personal efficacy. I have to believe that I can do, not that the universe is going to do it to me, and I have no power and no control. So I'll start looking at the situation of, you can have your beliefs about your situation if you want them. I won't touch them. But maybe they're not serving you. And maybe that's something that you want to look at and reflect on, whether you want to keep those beliefs or not. And somebody will say, well, you can't possibly do what you want. And I said, well, that's your belief. I have a different belief. And I say, really? Yes, I have a very different belief. Well, how can that be? Well, you and I have different beliefs. That's it. Now, I can help you change your beliefs if you want to do that, but I'm not going to convince you. I mean, it's important to have your beliefs, and if you want to hold on to them, you get to do that.
So you open up choice. You're not saying my belief is what's the right belief. You're saying, that's interesting, I have a different belief. And just by being faced with somebody with different beliefs opens up a door for change. And I think that's what coaches essentially do. They open up the possibility to change just by being faced with sometimes a different opinion or a different belief. And so many coaches, I think, struggle with, is it okay if I share my belief? Is it okay if I share my opinion? Because I shouldn't be guiding this. But by showing or by being met with somebody who thinks differently, opens up a door to maybe question my own beliefs and maybe not think like this person. And I think this is where the ego comes in, and we need to be really careful, because if somebody's looking up to us, and often the clients do look up to the coach, they hire the coach because they feel they know something, they're an expert in personal or professional growth. And if then that coach says, this is my belief, it's tempting for the client to say, oh, I should be adopting those beliefs because that person seemed to be doing well. Right? Especially if you work with somebody like Chérie, whose life seems to be perfect.
Yeah. And it's also important to help people find their I want statement. Mm-hmm. Because lots of times they'll talk about their situation or about their challenge or about their problem, but they won't necessarily make that I want statement, which is the first step out of the problem. Mm-hmm. Because it's bold to say, I want. Mm-hmm. It's brave. It's courageous. I mean, who are you to say what you want? Who are you to say that you have the right to want? That's courageous, even making that statement. And that's a good starting point for us to be able to say, all right, if we have an I want statement, then we can put that into our GPS, and that can guide us on our path together, because now we know the destination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what so much, if not all, coaching starts with, right? Certainly the one that is framed by the professional bodies out there. It's like there is a focus to the coaching work that starts with this I want. It starts with this desire. It starts with something that the client is coming in with, which makes it a very focused conversation. And I think that's part of the reason why coaching is such a powerful intervention, because you don't just go anywhere. You could go anywhere, but it's all focused by this thing you put there in the beginning.
I so agree. It's kind of like I have very often car metaphors, because most people know what a car is, and they've driven a car, they've ridden in a car. When you get in a car, you really like to have a destination. You don't necessarily just like to go for a drive. Unless you're way out in the countryside somewhere and you just want to drive around and look at the beautiful grass and trees. But for the most part, you have a destination. And that's what I think about coaching, because, that original word coach came from, it originally came from Hungary, and then it was translated. No? Yeah, well, it was this word coach, which would carry someone from where they were to where they wanted to be.
It was the village where they made the coaches, right? The cars.
I think it was 1550. And now today, still in the UK, we have these enormous buses that are called coaches that take people to their destination. Maybe it's a tour or something, but that's really, it's a carrying vehicle that takes someone from point A to point B, which is what they initially said they wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nobody hires a coach for 50 people to drive them around the countryside. Right. Well, actually, that depends on the countryside, I guess. But then yeah, exactly. Well, many beautiful neighborhoods today. Anyway, but yes, that's I think what characterizes a lot of coaching. Hey, I'm having a look at the time, and one thing that I wanted to tap into, because I know coaches always love a very practical thing that they can put into action right away, and I know you have so many powerful questions that you've used, that you've come about. And I wonder if you could share some of those questions that you have learned over time, just elicit some stuff. They just open some doors. And I appreciate often they're context specific and the right question comes at the right time. But I'm sure there's got to be a couple of questions that if you were to pick 5 of them and put them out there for coaches to consider, having their tool bag ready when they make sense, what might some of those questions be?
Well, always the first question has to do with, what do you want to focus on today? And what would you like to have at the end of our time together? Those are 2 like hand-in-hand questions that help us set the GPS in the right direction from the get-go. Then during the conversation, there'll be a kind of download of information from them about their situation or their circumstance so that I can understand what's going on. At some point, I will say to them, all right, let's put aside everybody else's opinion about what you should do right now. I heard that your mother wants this and your father wants that and your wife wants this and your son wants this. Everybody has these opinions. If you could just tell me secretly, ideally, what you would want to have happen. Now, I'm not going to hold you to it. I'm not going to make you do it. I just want to know secretly what you would want. And we don't have to tell all those other people. And then they kind of go into that place like, you mean I can really tell you what I really want? Yes, you can. And so that's when they usually come forward with, well, this is what I've been dreaming of or hoping or wishing or whatever. And when we get that moment revealed, then there's a pause usually. And the pause allows us to, what do we want to do with that? Is that something we want to tuck away in the secret box? Or do you want to explore that possibility together? Because once they reveal the secret, it's out of the box. That doesn't mean it has to stay out. It can go back in the box. But if it's out, they get to choose again. It's another choice moment. And as they grapple with whether they're ready, willing, and able to choose about what they truly want in their heart, then I start asking them questions like, what can I do to support you? What do you need? What are the steps going forward? If it were a perfect world and you could design it and we could make you king of the world, what would you do? So I would ask questions that very often are asking someone to crawl into their creativity, their imagination, the part of them that's childlike and used to imagine. And maybe they haven't imagined for a very long time because they're very structured, responsible, good people who do the right thing, but they haven't been creative in a while. So that's when I'll kind of tap into that part of them and say, let me know what would be really magical for you. What outcome would you like? I mean, it reminds me of one of my very first coaching sessions back in 1974 with a woman who used to be an opera singer. I remember she came to me and she said, I had surgery and I can't sing anymore. And I said, oh, and she said, I have to figure out what I'm going to do next. And I said, okay. So remember, I'm in the not knowing mindset. And so I'm asking her, what do you like? She said, I like to eat. Said, that's nice. What else?
Starting point. Yeah.
What else? She said, I like to shop. I said, okay, good. She said, I like to speak French. I said, great. She said, and I like to go to elegant restaurants and have fine dining. I said, and what else? And she said, that's it. I thought to myself, I'm so glad I don't have to know the answers. I'm so glad. Gosh, this
I
is a
feel
real
lost.
So we played around with it, and we started looking at people she knew who were in the food industry, in the restaurant industry, in the linguistics area, people who were in retail. We started, and we made lists of these people, and then we made lists of questions, and then we set her on a kind of research process of finding out from people what it was like to be in their profession. And would she like that? Would she enjoy that? And could she hang around? And could she be in that? Ways to be able to try it on, to be able to see if it was a match for her. After 4 sessions, one a month for 4 months, she called me on the phone and she said, I got a job. And I said, really? And she said, yes, sit down. So I sat down. She said, I'm working for, and it was the biggest department store in San Francisco at the time. And I said, oh, that's great. I thought, shopping. She said, but my first assignment is to be the translator for Cachurel, the designer who is coming from Paris to San Francisco. I need to take the executive staffs to restaurants, translate, and eat.
Wow.
I sat with my mouth hanging open because I really couldn't even believe how this happens. And she said, are you some kind of a witch? How did this happen? And I said, well, I'm really happy for you that everything you wished for came into existence because of the truth that you told. And she said, I'm so happy. All 4 things that I mentioned to you are in my first job assignment.
Wow.
And I thought, this coaching is amazingly powerful. It's amazing what can happen when people tell the real truth about their secrets inside.
Yeah, the courage to be vulnerable, to really show yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. I'm sitting in the glow of that story. I don't want to sit in it for too long, though. I've got one last thing that I wanted to bring up with you, because we train transformational coaches. So we're particularly interested in transformation. And you've seen people transform, or perhaps not transform, depending on how you look at it. That's why I want to explore your perspective on it. Because some people describe the way you describe it seems more like finding access to who you really are and what you really want, which you could argue is not a change. It's like, it's a change of what you're doing and how you're doing it, but it's not really a change of who you are. It's just finding access to that person, to that self. So in that context, I wonder what you've learned about transformation, what your perspective is on transformation, and how do you create that for people? Some of that you will have already answered.
Well, it's a great question. And a big part of transformation is watching the light go on. And that could be the light of illumination, of clarity, of the calling, if you will. It could be the light that allows them to move from the shoulds, meeting the expectations of others, to listening to their own inner spiritual DNA. It often is a person seeing that they can make a difference in the world, that they can follow their dream, that they can influence others, that they can be a positive force. I mean, transformation for me is when a person has been in a certain state, and when they transform, what they become is that butterfly. I mean, it's a classic situation of the caterpillar, the chrysalis, and then the butterfly. But when the butterfly shows up, it's definitely beauty transformed. And when the person is in alignment with their highest and best self, they become beautiful, just like the butterfly.
And it can feel very like a very gooey piece of nothingness inside of you before that emerges. And I think that's the commitment part, where it's necessary and very important that as coaches we hold that space very well, because when we deconstruct or take away some of those shoulds or some of those layers of who we think we are, and really try to get to the inside. A butterfly comes out after there's a gooey mess inside, and then the butterfly grows from that. And I think that gooey mess part can be really scary for coaches as a space to hold someone, taking some of those rugs out and seeing a client fall in front of you and trying to hold that space. It's a lot of responsibility.
As you talk about the gooey mess, it going from that fixed state into the transition or the change state, and then back into that frozen state, as Lewin said back when in his theory of change, the gooey mess, or whether it's melted or whatever it is, it's no more defined. Mm-hmm. And when it's not defined, it's
malleable
state where it can become something different than what it was. Mm-hmm. And that change, that transformation, is where someone starts to look and see, who do I want to be? Who really am I inside? What is my purpose? What is my destiny? What am I doing on this earth?
I think I want to end here because it feels like a fantastic metaphor, as we're talking about the gooiness, which is so full of potential, of people actually creating their own narrative. I think coaches need to do the same. Sometimes we break some barriers down and we break some of the shoulds, and then the coach can decide, what coach do I want to be? Who am I as a person? Who you are is how you practice, how you coach, is what I often say. And so what a wonderful space to be in. And I'd encourage every coach to allow themselves to, be that gooey mess sometimes and ask those questions. And I think you've done a wonderful service to the coaching community to offer some of those questions out. So thank you so much for that, Chérie.
Thank you, Yannick, so much for having me in your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Anything you want to tell coaches out there? Maybe if people wanted to enter your sphere, tap into more of what they've just listened to. You've written a lot. I wonder if you could point coaches to where they might start that kind of journey if they wanted to be closer to Chérie.
Well, as you mentioned before, and Oprah loved this book very much. It's called If Life is a Game, These Are the Rules, 10 Rules for Being Human. That a lot of people know the 10 rules, but they don't necessarily know that the 10 rules were written by me in 1974, and they don't know that they're the structure and the basis of the book. The other book is that Transformational Life Coaching, which is that everything that we believe in our coaching process and that we include in that, we put in the book as a textbook for our course. And so if people want to know more about me and about what I do, If Life is a Game is our general philosophy of life, that we're all here together to be able to grow, to be able to become our best selves, to be able to make a difference, and to be able to make the world a better place. And the coaching book, it spells it out. If people don't like the book, they should choose another avenue, because that's really what we stand for. And not everybody agrees with it, and that's okay.
Yeah, they do their own kind of coaching. That's okay too.
Yes, totally fine.
Chérie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Please keep doing what you do. And I hope you have many more decades of inspiring coaches and the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yannick.